Welcome. It is so great to see or be here again. It's been quite a while since I've done a Microsoft Reactor stream. So pop in the chat where you're joining from, and we're going to have some good fun today. I think we can just remove that session starting soon. Now, there we go. That's gone. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about how you can maintain and scale your apps on Azure. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Rav, give us a yes if you can see that one, because I can't see StreamYard.
Yes, all good. We can see your screen.
Awesome. So, who am I? My name is Liam Hampton, and I'm a senior cloud advocate and software engineer here at Microsoft, and I work within the developer tooling team. So if you've ever used any of the awesome dev tools that we have at Microsoft, Visual Studio Code, Copilot, any of the CLI tools, I work in that team that helps advocate with them or work with the product groups. So I give them feedback, and yeah, we help build that and make it better for everybody. So just a sort of a disclaimer, I'm not feeling 100% today. So I'm going to try my best with my voice, and going to take it a bit slower than usual. So before we get going, I just want to talk through the code of conduct. It's really important that we abide by this one so that we are friendly to everybody. Don't put any nasties in the chat. It's really important that we're friendly to everybody, and we're here to learn and have a good time. So yeah, please be kind to one another. That's super important, and that's one of the main sort of ethoses that we run by here at Microsoft Reactor. So what's the agenda? What are we going to talk through today? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI applications, what they are. We're going to look at how you can scale your applications as per the name, and maintaining your applications as per the name of the presentation. Going to look at how you can stay secure with them and how you can continuously stay secure when you're building your applications. And then obviously developer tooling as well. So how you can use the developer tools that we have at Microsoft to have a good time and how sort of build great applications that you can deploy, scale, and maintain. So on the screen here, you're going to see a QR code. And if you can't scan that one, go to ak.ms/scale maintain apps resources, and this will take you to all the resources from the session today that I'm going to share. So also apologize for any background noise. I am in the office today, streaming this live. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and scan that one, then it'll take you to all the resources posted on the Microsoft Reactor communities. So just give you a few seconds to do that one. So if you are posting in the chat and you are saying anything, I can't see the chat, but we'll get to that probably when we get to the demo side of this one, because I'm going to have a demo at the end as well. So the main question I get asked quite a lot when I'm talking to the community and other developers and people that want to learn about developing software and writing code and learning how to code, or learning cloud for that matter of fact, is what is an AI application? Now, an AI application is a tool that performs a specific task that typically humans would do, so like you and I would perform it, but actually uses AI instead. Now, AI has been around for actually longer than I think we probably all realize, and it's been embedded in a lot of the everyday life longer than I think we all realize, but only the past 2 years has it really come to light for everybody. So here's a few ways that we're using it. So we look at software development. Now, this is probably more of a newer way that we're using AI, but if you think about Copilot or ChatGPT, you just pop it into the box. How do I create a node application, or how do I create a hello world in Python, for example? I'm learning Python. And this is how AI can sort of help us with generative AI. Now, there's a whole list of different types of artificial intelligence, which I can talk through in a minute. But here's some of the applications. If we look at search, for example, search is a really powerful one. Now, you've probably heard of Bing, or some of you may use Bing. Obviously, I do here at Microsoft. But I was also working with a founder who is part of Microsoft Founders Hub, who is building out this project based around GPT and searching documentation. Now, this was a really awesome project, I feel, and kind of going off on a bit of a tangent here, but he's built a service which allows you to ask natural language to a search bar that goes or is trained on specific documentation of a product. Now, the example that he used and he showed was actually with Lyft. Now, he'd never ordered a Lyft before, and he wanted to order a Lyft, but he didn't know how to book a Lyft. Now, Lyft being the competitor to Uber, I believe it's only in America. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But there was no 1, 2, 3. Here's how you book a Lyft. He gave him like a whole load of different articles on booking a lift, what to do if you've had a lift cancelled, all this kind of stuff. And I thought it was amazing because this is a problem which I didn't even realize existed until now. But we're using AI to sort of train models on that data to only ask specific questions to the documentation, and it will give you 3 or 4 steps on how to book a lift. I thought it was a really awesome way of using AI. But there's so many products that are being built around it. If you think about sales and sort of forecasting, that's a really important way that we're using AI to sort of generate revenue and get better return on investment. Automotive industry, Tesla, for example, self-driving cars, or the other sort of autonomous vehicles that we're seeing now. I don't know, we've got things like Boston Dynamics with robots as well. That's not listed on here. But mobile apps as well. Google Maps, for example, has used AI for longer than I think we all realize. And you can kind of see it's literally used everywhere throughout the entire industry, or many industries rather. But it's absolutely revolutionizing sort of how we're interacting with everyday life. It's just more at the forefront now than I think it ever has been before. Now, when we come to talking about AI and the different sort of subsets of AI, we've got artificial narrow intelligence, you've got artificial general intelligence, you've got super intelligence, reactive AI, limited memory AI, theory of mind AI, and self-aware AI. There's so many different sort of narratives that you can go down. And if you think about generative AI, it's just a subset of artificial narrow intelligence. And then obviously you've got subsets of that, like text generation, video generation, image generation, all these different subsets which come under AI. Now, we're not going to dig too deep into that one today because we want to kind of try and keep it high level and do more of a developer tools session, how you can actually scale these applications. But these are just some of how we're using them, or some of the ways we're using it today. So how do we scale applications? Ignoring AI just for a minute, how do we scale them? Well, you want to increase your resources based on demand. That's typically what scaling is. And there's 2 generic ways that we do this. First is horizontal, and this is where you add the same compute power, more of it, basically, side by side. And then you've got vertical compute power, where you're adding more powerful computers instead of scaling outwards. But the main thing to sort of think about when you're scaling is it always needs to be elastic. Now, this is when it needs to bend and sort of conform with the demand that you have. And this is really important because this then produces a whole number of issues, or I guess challenges, to think about when you're dealing with AI applications. So here's some of the thoughts and challenges which I want to bring to the forefront. We have cost. Now, this is a pretty obvious one when it comes to AI applications. It's very costly to run them. Hardware, compute power, you name it. I think the best company that's done the best of all of this is probably NVIDIA, given that AI applications or AI models and training is done on GPUs, and I think this is widely known. But yeah, it's very difficult to scale, and this is why sometimes you see an error, or at least we did in the early days of ChatGPT, saying we're at capacity now. We can't take any more requests. I mean, I certainly see this at the moment, and I saw it only yesterday when I was sort of playing one of these demos, and it was on Azure OpenAI, because you end up reaching a limit to which you can scale before it becomes too costly for people to use. So cost is a really big thing to think about when you start introducing AI into scalable applications. You then have skills. Now, skills is, I'm going to say there's probably a bit of a skills gap at the moment. Now, I did this today. I just searched London for AI engineers, and 786 results today. This is today here in London. That's how many roles are available for an AI engineer. Now, this is interesting, I think. And I think this is thought-provoking because this is the shift that we're seeing now in the market. But that led me to a question. Do these companies really need AI engineers? Does that company need AI? Or are they just doing it for clout, just because everybody else is doing it? Now, that's a question which I keep asking myself is when I'm looking at these products and services that I use, does it need AI? Do we need to use AI? What's really the push behind this one? And then you've got the availability of models. Well, this is another problem when it comes to scaling, because not every model is available in every single region. So if we look at, let's just take the very top one, Australia East, for example. This is off our documentation, and you can see that it has got a couple of models that are available, but then there's a few models that are not. So when you want to scale your applications out, especially when you have AI sort of implemented within them, you then want to think about the cost effectiveness of that model, because some regions may also be more expensive than other regions. And it's like a whole big wheelhouse of fun, I'm going to say, to work this out. But you end up with working out your margins at this point. So when it comes to scaling applications, especially with AI, you have to think about all these different things, which people don't necessarily talk about too often. And I've run into these problems sort of, I'm not going to say daily, but every so often I do run into this issue. So that's just some food for thought and some challenges when it comes to scaling your AI apps. So how do we maintain those applications? Now, again, we're going to eliminate AI for the first bit, and then we're going to add it in. So how do you look after that production environment, that holy grail, that sort of that big golden star that you've got deployed in the cloud or deployed wherever it is? How do you maintain that and look after it to the best of your ability? Well, that's when you start looking at DevOps. So a little bit about me, a bit of context. My background is all based in DevOps and this whole life cycle of how you get from a planning stage to production, eliminating waterfall, all those kind of things, right? Working in an agile environment. But when you really look at it, it's a whole cultural shift. It's not a technology, it's a cultural shift, a cultural push, and it's a whole change of mindset, because you have all these different tools, which again brings a whole lot of complexity to skill sets, because not one developer is going to be able to know every single thing about the DevOps lifecycle. So when it comes to maintaining these applications, you have to vigorously stay within these margins and these guide rails around what you're actually deploying, how you're deploying it, and when you're deploying it. So if you just look on here, if you want to plan, you might plan in something like Jira or project boards in GitHub. If you're coding, you may code in Go. I'm a Go developer, but you may be versed in Python or Java or JavaScript. Then you'd be building that. So obviously you'd use Maven or Gradle or any of the other build components or tool sets that you would use. Testing, you've got Cypress. Even that first subset of development there, I've outlined a whole number of tools which one developer needs to know but might not know inside out, end to end. So it's just food for thought at this point. This is without AI. The minute you start implementing AI, artificial intelligence, or models into your tooling, you then have to add an extra layer of complexity, because now you're looking at ML ops, right? You've got data that you're training models on, you're sort of iterating over it, you're keeping up to date with the new releases. It's very difficult to do. So you end up with this sort of cycle that looks a little bit like this. Some call it ML ops, some call it ML DevOps, and it's totally up to you. But this is where you got to think about the versioning of the models, the versioning of scripts, data integrity, because if you put rubbish in, you're going to get rubbish out. And if rubbish goes through to production, how do you then sanitize that again? It's a really difficult, I say, cycle to get stuck in, but it's one that everybody really needs to start thinking about. So when you start adding AI into these sort of applications that you want to then maintain, you then have more guide rails. So again, food for thought when it comes to looking at ML ops. So then what about security? Now, security is a fun one for me. I like security. And I've got a good story in a minute to tell you. But the security of applications is ultimately the pinnacle. It should be the first thing that you think about when it comes to creating or building an application. But most of the time it's not. I'd say a good 8 out of 10 developers that I speak to just don't think about security at all until it's time for production. I was like, oh, I should have done that, shouldn't I? But actually, it's not that difficult. It's just having a forward thinking and a proactive mindset, right? So how can you stay secure? Here's some of the sort of, I guess, the principles which I go by. And this will all make sense at the end as to why we're going through it in this way. But principles of least privilege, or zero trust, as some people might say. So this should be only enough access for you to do your job. That's it. And I've got a really good story about this one. So when I was an intern, I'm not going to tell you where I was an intern, but everybody had admin accounts. It was a small company. We all had admin accounts. We could all do whatever we wanted to do within our cloud accounts, and it seemed all good fun. Now, I was learning SQL at the time. Now, just by saying that, I'm sure a lot of you can probably tell me or tell where this is going. But I was told to create a test database and play within the test database and get to grips with SQL, understand how SQL language works. And it was all good fun until I realized I'd done something very bad. Now, I had actually managed to log into a production database. The naming clearly was terrible. The fact that I managed to do that one. I was playing in a production database, in a client's database. I shouldn't have had access to do that one. And then you do that wonderful select all, delete from said column. I managed to delete a whole load of database data. Now, I thought this was terrifying at the time, but I look back and it was a really good learning curve, not just for me, but for the company as well. Thankfully, it was fine. Everything was okay. It was all backed up, as you'd expect. But it just reminds me that zero trust, they shouldn't have trusted me with that one. Not only was I learning SQL or SQL, I was learning how to be a developer at this point, learning the ropes. I was young. I was an intern. So what I learned from that was I shouldn't have access to that database. The naming should have been better, and I should have had a test environment to play with. It clearly wasn't a test environment, and I didn't know how to make one. But it was all like there was a whole load of things that went wrong that was then learned on. So zero trust and principles of least privilege is an absolute must when it comes to maintaining those applications in production. Then you've got the shift left. So when I say shift left, I'm talking about embedding the security into code itself. Now, don't wait until it's been deployed to think, oh, there's a vulnerability over there. You should be proactive at this point, and you should be able to identify security vulnerabilities very quickly at a package level. So let's think about Node. Node.js or NPM pulls in a lot of packages. Who knows who they're written by? Who knows that they didn't just come from someone's bedroom and there's a lot of malicious code behind it? Obviously it's vetted and there's obviously tools out there to scan it, but some things do slip through, hence why we see patches. So embedding this into the code itself and shifting this whole security mindset left is paramount. You have to do this. You're ensuring that you're not exposing keys or identifiable information in the logs. When you deploy it, you are not committing those keys to Git, for example. Have that proactive mindset at this level instead of being reactive later down the line. So this is a really important concept to try and understand in graphs. Now, I've got more on this at the end, so there's certainly some resources to sort of read over. And if you're a business decision maker or a technical decision maker and you have influence, then try investing in some extra tools. So try a cloud access broker, for example. Get the visibility into your applications, what's going on, where it's happening, and what data is being transferred around your whole sort of ecosystem. So invest in those tools. And then finally, managed identities. This is something that we're working on very heavily at the moment in Microsoft. You would have seen a number of streams from my colleagues all around the world who have been talking about managed identities. Well, managed identities are just a way for you to authenticate to any resource in Azure that supports Microsoft Entra authentication. So this could be your application, or it could be somebody else's application. If you have that managed identity that you can talk to and you have the right access, wonderful. You can use them at absolutely no extra cost. So it's just the same as using any other sort of method. This is just the preferred way. And again, I'm going to show you in the code how we do this. Now, what this means is that you eliminate the need for secrets, credentials, certificates, and keys, and whatever else it is that you as a developer have to manage when you deploy and want to talk to your applications. Okay, so you don't need that .env file, you don't need those API keys anymore, you use a managed identity. And again, I'll show you how we do that one. So this now turns me to the developer tool side of this. Now, I work very closely with the Azure Developer CLI. So I work very closely with this team. You may have seen me on some of their streams. You may have seen me on producing some of the content with them. If you have, thank you. It's cool. It's a really awesome tool. But this actually employs everything we've spoken about to this point. So using developer tools that help you do this makes your life as a developer so much easier and so much better. So what is the Azure Developer CLI? Well, it's a form of platform engineering. So when we talk about platform engineering, we are looking at improving the developer experience. Now, this can be done through automated infrastructure operations, for example, right? So how you get from A to B automatically and how you can automate that one in a pipeline, for example. And then my ultimate goal is to create this frictionless self-service experience that minimizes the overhead and cognitive load for you as a developer, so you don't have to think as much, and you're not getting too many context switching. After all, this is AI infrastructure that's being deployed, so it's super complex. Took me so long to get to grips with deploying applications properly with Azure OpenAI and sort of interacting with them properly and having them done securely. So it's actually a very difficult situation, which I know, speaking to some developers, it can be quite daunting and quite hard. So let's take it all back to basics and let's understand what you're actually doing with this tooling. So pop in the chat if you've used it and just let me know, because it'd be really awesome to see how many of you are using this tool set. But let's just take a 3-tier application. For example, we've got a front end, we have got a back end, so a server and a front UI, and a database. So really super simple 3-tier application, which you typically build if you're a full stack developer. But it can be quite difficult. I'm not a full stack developer, so I'd actually have an issue with the front end here. I can do the back end and database. I love back end engineering. I don't like front end. I just can't, I'm not that creative. That's not me. So how do you create it? Or how could I get up to grips quickly and easily and get started and build something of use without it just being sort of like a stick person and a few dotted lines and some real basic text with this really cool backend which can do everything I need it to do? So this is when we look at getting that from local to a cloud environment. So let's say I've managed to get that front end built, I've managed to get that back end built, and I've managed to get the database working with full CRUD. How do I get that to the cloud? That's now the next step. And again, it's actually very difficult because you may be able to get it up into the cloud, but how do you get them talking to each other? Because ultimately, these are going to be different services that talk to one another. I wouldn't say this is going to be a monolith. I'd say this is going to be a microservice architecture. So I need them all to talk to each other seamlessly and securely. Very difficult. And that's my face whenever I have to do this manually. I don't like doing it. So what are some of the use cases of the Azure Developer CLI? Well, if you're building a new startup, for example, I already mentioned, I was chatting and working with one of the Founders Hub members who has got the GPT based around search. So a lot of founders I speak to are typically not technical. So they have this really great business idea, and then they think they have to spend thousands of pounds to try and find a developer. That's not true. You can start investing your time into tools like this that'll be able to use a template, and you'll be able to then get up and running super quickly with, have this full application running, and then you can bring on board a developer and be like, right, don't worry about the setup. I've got the setup. You just need to modify it to make it do this. So building a new startup is a really cool way to use this tool. If you've got a new team, for example, you run a team and you want to onboard somebody new, again, instead of spending 2 or 3 days setting the whole environment up and getting them up to speed just to write 1 line or 2 lines of code, that real basic first issue ticket that they need to complete, you could do this in minutes. It doesn't take long to deploy something at all. Another good thing, or another good use case for AZD, is environment separations. So let's talk about the issue that I had. If I had a test environment to play with my database, that would have been totally fine, but I didn't. So with AZD, you can actually specify, you can build infrastructure for your test environment, your production environment, your development environment, your pre-production environment, just to be extra safe. So it has environmental separations, which I think is a really awesome feature of this tooling, right? Because it enables you to do blue-green deployments, A/B testing, those kind of things. So again, perfect tool. And finally, students and university classes. So if you are a lecturer and you're writing a lab, I remember being at university and I remember spending an entire hour, of my 1 hour lectures, just to set up the environment that I was going to use for the next lecture. So this could do it in minutes. So it's another really good use case to be able to use it in universities or schools. So we talk about installations. The AZD is actually compatible with the 3 operating systems. So you've got Windows, you can use Winget, Choco, you've got Linux, so you can use curl, and you've got a Mac like myself, you can use Brew to install it. So super simple. It is also available in code spaces. So if you are a fan of remote dev environments like me, you can also use it up there. There's some documentation which will be on the resources page, which you should get again at the end. To see how that's installed. So let's look at some of the commands that you use with AZD. So developers typically are used to imperative. paradigm CLIs, where you have lots of flags or arguments. Let's take the Azure CLI, for example. To create a resource group, you have to do AZ, resource create, blah, 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 blah. Give it the name, give it the location, give it everything. And then you want to add a resource to it. Then you want to do AZ, create, app service, blah, 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 give it a name, location, SKU, you name it, security parameters. That's a lot of work, and that's what developers are typically used to. Whereas AZD has gone for a more high-level command, where you've got AZD init to initialize your application or your repository. You've got AZD up to deploy what is like a combination of a couple of commands. AZD up is. You've got AZD monitor to get a dashboard. You've got pipeline config. So if you have or want to have a CI/CD pipeline with your application, it will create the whole, I think, service principal, everything that goes with it, so you can securely deploy your applications on code changes. And you've got, of course, AZD down. So when you're done with it, you can just rip it all down with AZD down. So I think this is like super useful for developers, not only to remember, not only to use, but also understand. Because if you ask me to do everything with the Azure CLI, probably wouldn't be able to. I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to. I'd have to go off to Bing or Google or the documentation and wherever else just to try and get the correct flags, parameters, and arguments. And by the way, a quick disclaimer, this is not all of the commands. There are a few more, which I will show you in a minute. So the other thing I want to say is this is not just a CLI, it's an extension. So if you're on Visual Studio, you can, I think you enable the feature flag or the preview flag, you'll be able to get it. If you're in Visual Studio Code, you can download and install the Marketplace extension. And this just allows you to work within your editor, so you don't always need to be in the CLI, right? You can just use the command palette. So it's an ecosystem. You've also got the Bicep extension as well, because you're using Bicep. Actually, probably one thing I didn't mention was these templates that you're going to be using with AZD, because it's not only for Greenfield projects, it's also for Brownfield as well, but you can use templates. This actually uses Bicep. So a domain-specific language, which allows you to kind of like a wrapper around ARM templates, if you've ever used ARM before. So Azure Resource Management templates. This is more of a friendlier, less verbose way of writing that, basically. But it takes Bicep and obviously deploys your infrastructure. But it's also compatible with Terraform. Now that's the gotcha, because people think, oh, it's Bicep. I don't know Bicep. I don't want to learn something new. Well, actually, if you know Terraform, it is compatible with Terraform as well. I mentioned templates. There's an entire template library which you can go to, and I'm going to show you now, probably right after this slide, actually. The kind of templates which you can find and get to grips with and use, and how to get started and the quick starts to use them. So yeah, if you go to azure.github.io/awesomeazd, which I think is an awesome name, I think it's brilliant because you can also contribute to this as well. It is open source. So if you have a project that you want to create a template for, you can also have that reviewed and submitted. You can see here in the screenshots, Microsoft authored and community authored. So it doesn't just come from Microsoft employees, it does come from the community. So we do take contributions, and I think that's one of the best bits about this, is getting everybody involved. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour. I say quick, that was half an hour, sorry. Let's move on to a demo. Let me show you how I use AZD to maintain and scale. So going to look at the templates, and this is going to be what we're going to touch on today. I'm going to show you. So what this is a container app inside a container apps environment, which has a managed identity attached to it, allowing me to talk to Azure Cognitive Searches. So basically going to be able to create a ChatGPT emulation using Azure OpenAI, and it's going to be all packaged up in a lovely container stored in container registry. So I'm just going to hop out of this one and have a quick sip of water. So I'm going to stop sharing these slides and move on to the template library.
Yeah,
sorry,
all good.
throat. Okay, so hopefully we can see my screen here. And actually, before we get going, I'm going to see if there's any comments that we can go through. No, not yet. So if you have anything, so okay, Jill, hello. Hello, everybody. Pop in the chat. Tell us where you're joining from. Show us, tell me where you're from, and if you've used this before. I see Cyprus. Nice. Cool. We're like multinational already. That's one of the first comments. Love it. pop in there. And yeah, let me know if you want to see more on AZD, because we're going to dive right into it. So, template library, what is it? Well, this is awesome AZD, and this will basically where everything is stored for all the templates. Now, you might think GitHub. Now, this is like a preface to GitHub. This is like a nicer way of showing you what they are, or sort of explaining what they are with filters. I think the design is pretty cool. But you can filter by languages. So let's say Python, because I want to show you a Python app today. And let's scroll down, and there's one that I'm actually looking for. So you can see there's loads on here, right? LangChain, Elasticsearch, you've got functions called Impromptu, Jupyter Notebooks, that's community authored. And when I say like community, this is what I mean. This is where I'm looking. So community authored. Where's the one that I'm looking for? I think it's down here. Here we go. It looks like it's actually been duplicated. Lovely stuff. So simple chat application using Azure OpenAI. So if I click on the title, I can see here that we've got template details, the quick use. So you've got AZD in it. So like I said, that's one of the very first commands that you'd use. And you can just decide, if you don't have a workspace set up already, you can just do -t and give it the name of the template. I actually already have this one. So we're just going to go ahead and look in GitHub, and let's go and just understand a little bit more about what it is that we're going to be deploying. So that looks kind of cool. It's written in Python. It's an OpenAI chat app, so we already know it's going to be talking to Azure OpenAI. So let's scroll down and let's just have a little look about the README. So we can see that you can open it in GitHub code spaces, dev containers, compatibility, and it looks very much like a ChatGPT emulation. You've got the architecture diagram, which you just saw in the slides. And yeah, let's just go have a little look at what it's doing, right? So let's move over into VS Code. So I've got this running in VS Code. Let's just have a little look at it. So I've got chat.py opened up, right? This is what an application typically looks like. You've got your dev container, your GitHub file, docs, your infrastructure folder, which is what AZD creates for you, along with your .azure file or folder, rather. And in here, you've got all your bicep. So this is where you're going to see all of your services being created. So here we can see the cognitive service being created. It's quite a simple thing to get to grips with, really, because it's kind of key value pairs, right? And you can just sort of export and import variables based on output of different modules. It's very modular. So if you look here, we're going to have the account name, you've got the properties, you've got the SKU. So we're just going to use the standard SKU. Capacity is 20. So you see what I want to do with that one. And then you've got the output variables down here. So everything which comes from above, you can output down here and pull into a different module, which is just brilliant. Okay, then you've got your main bicep, which sort of pulls it all in at the top. So as we can see here, we've got different parameters, so your location, and then you're setting that later down. Down in here, you've got obviously your managed identity, which will be used obviously by standard, and that is preferred. That's our preferred method of authentication. Get my words out. So we're going to be using managed identities in this one. And I'm going to show you how I use that, or how we use that in a Python application. So rather than calling or using a local API key, which we're not doing here, you just have like an if-else statement, right? So you got, if there's a local open API endpoint, we're going to use that. So basically, if it's like using Llama, like a local model, then use that one. Otherwise, if there is an Azure OpenAI key, we're going to grab that one, but we don't have an Azure OpenAI key for this. Otherwise, we're just going to be using managed identities. Now, I've got a default credential here, and this is all that's needed for this one. So you're going to be popping in the default credential. You're going to call the SDK. You're going to sort of work with the bearer token to get that one, and this is all we need. Right? This is a default authentication with managed identities. Now, I'm absolutely not an expert on this one. Other colleagues have done streams all on this one. So if you want that one, I'll pop that in, and I'll go ahead and find one of the streams for you. Yeah, that is all that's needed to use managed identities inside your app, right? As long as you set it up correctly on the back end and your infrastructure, you could just call it in your application just like this. And it's pretty standard across the board. We do have documentation online for this one. So let's go and actually have a look at AZD. So AZD commands, let's do AZD -H, okay? And I kind of showed you this in the slides, but you've got your pretty sort of bog standard authentication, config, hooks, inits, deploy, down, env, package. They're like very basic commands. They don't come with hundreds of flags and arguments. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an AZD up on this one. And I want to show you exactly what happens when we run AZD up, because ultimately we should just get a chat app, right? So if I do AZD up, hopefully it hasn't logged me out. It's just going to call bicep. So it wraps around the bicep CLI, builds a new Docker image based on anything that I have. I haven't made any changes, so this should actually be pretty quick. But we're going to go ahead and make a change in a minute. And I totally forgot to do the one thing which I was supposed to do there. And I was supposed to put the demo mode as true. The demo mode as true would just make sure that I don't get my subscription name out or out in the output. Already failed my security 101 there, but it's fine. You can't do anything with that one. So all it's doing now is it's just going to be updating the container apps for me, because I think it's noticed that there might have been maybe one change, or it's deploying, it's just waiting to deploy it rather. There we go. In 36 seconds, it was able to redeploy my application. So now if we go ahead and open this up, we should be able to go and play with the application in production. And this would just be absolutely hilarious if it didn't work, but it does, thank goodness. So I can say, hi, what model are you? And now we can have like a chat GPT-esque experience with this running in production. So I don't know, can you tell me what the weather will be like in London during the summer? Because hey, it's actually typically really bad weather. It's actually pretty dull. It's been raining. I don't know if you're from London or if anyone's watching the UK. It's not the best. But here, you can ask it general questions just like you would with ChatGPT. It's using GPT-3. So again, it's one of the basic models. Still really awesome to use though. And if we hop over into Azure, then we can go and see what it's actually created. So using AZD up, now I cheated a little bit for a little bit of time saving, and I ran this before the stream. And what you typically get is the output. So it provisions all of your infrastructure. And by provisioning, it goes ahead and starts creating or make sure that it can create the infrastructure in your account inside of resource group. And this is what it's created. So we've got Azure OpenAI, we've got a container app, we've got the app environment, we've got managed identity, log analytics workspace, and the container registry. So now we can, if you want to use the portal, you can absolutely go in and dig into this. So we can have a look at the container app, for example, and you can dig in and you can go and see some of the logs or the log stream. For example, this is my favorite place to be when debugging. So you run into the log stream, you'll create a couple of requests, you can go into the console, and you can go and just tapping away inside the container as if you were actually on the system itself, which I think is really quite cool. So now, because I've showed you how to do it when you just do it off the bat, just do AZD up, what happens if you make a code change? Now, I don't know how to make a code change. I want to change the background, for example, the background color. So I'm just going to go ahead and use Copilot, and I'm going to use the workspace command, and I'm going to say, how do I change the background color of this application? Because I don't know where to go for this one. I'm just going to see if Copilot can tell me where I need to go in here. And it's already said, okay, so there is a style. There's a style sheet somewhere, so it's in static style. So I'm just going to jump down the folder tree and have a look in here. So we've got the style.css. That's cool. I can probably do this without writing CSS inside like the proper way. I can just do this a quick way. What's in index.html? If you have a look in here, this is where the actual bulk of it is actually being set out. So I've just used Copilot. Tell me how I can change the background color of the app with inline styling. So hopefully we can do some inline styling, because I don't really want to play around with the style sheet too much. Telling me how to do this. There's a lot in here. Maybe I can just take what I want from this one. Okay, so there's a div. So saying do it on one of the divs. I don't want to do it on the div, I want to do it on the body. I want the whole thing. So maybe we can just do this one. Style, let's just say background color. This looks very similar, kind of. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Wow, this has really gone to town, hasn't it? There we go. This is what I want. Background color at the end, style. Let's just call it blue. I like blue. Blue's my favorite color, by the way. So let's close Copilot and let's see if we can do an AZD deploy this time. So I'm not going to do an AZD up, I'm going to do AZD deploy. Now, once you make a change, you don't need to provision all your stuff again. You just need to be able to recompile the application itself. So let's just do an AZD deploy and see what happens. Oh, there we go. Let's just leave it there. I don't want to have a big bug in my terminal. And while it's doing this, if there's any questions, pop them in the chat. So I see we got Abril. Hello, Abril. How are you doing? It's good to see you online. And hopefully, what we get from this one is a blue background. Fingers crossed. We're going to see. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I tried. But this is just to sort of emulate exactly what we're doing when you make a code change, because it can look quite arduous. 29 seconds is absolutely not the default. This would typically take a couple of minutes. This is quite fast because I'm not changing much. But when you first spin this up, it could take 5 to 10 minutes to properly set everything up and do it, which is why I did it offline. I didn't do it online. But hey, let's go and check out this endpoint. Let's go see if it's actually blue. I'd be really interested. It actually is, and it did work. So that's how quickly you can change. You can change your application code and deploy it with AZD, which I think is really quite cool. So although it looks pretty simple, there's a lot that's going on in the back end with this one, because you then need to rebuild the containers. You need to push the containers up. The container instance or the container app service needs to pull that in and be able to show you. This is kind of like a rolling update, almost similar to what you're using with Kubernetes, for example. When you have like that seamless switchover, if one pod dies or one node goes down, then you've got another one to take its place. And that seamless switchover when you make a change. So again, we can just say hello, and it's still working just as it was before, just with a different background. I apologize if for accessibility, that color is just absolutely glaring and not very nice. So let's take that one off. But you can still see that it is working and absolutely fine. Yes, Gonzalo, I will absolutely be sharing this repo. It is also on the resources page, which I shared a moment ago. So again, I'm going to flash up these slides with the QR code so that you can see it. And Brav, actually, if you're listening, can you just pop into the chat the link to the resources page? So if people don't see this or have missed it, then they can just click on it from the chat as well. So yeah, I think as far as AZD goes, AZ deploy, you can bring this down now. And if I can do AZD down, I'm just going to do purge because it just rips everything down. It doesn't ask me any questions. That's how I would pull it down. So if I do AZD down -- purge, then it will pull everything else that is in production and pull it down. And I'm just going to go yes. Now, this might actually take a few minutes. I'm not going to show this now. I'm just going to pull it down because we're done with the demo. But that's exactly what you do. So it's a really good way to test, to spin things up quickly, to pull them down and start again. So yeah, let's go back into the slides and just going to share my screen again. Let's do a quick wrap up. How does this help you? Well, when it comes to scaling, maintaining, and securing your development environments, the developer tools that you use really make a difference. Now, not just because I work with the team, but I've actually used the Azure Developer CLI for a while now, a good year or so, and I use it with everything. Everything I do, I use this because it is actually one of the best ways to push me in the right direction, to use the best practices when it comes to security, when it comes to writing code, when it comes to deploying and maintaining. It pushes you in the right direction. So you have full control over your infrastructure for scaling and maintaining. Like I said, you're working with Bicep and Terraform code, so you have like all your code in one place. Everything is there. It's all under one roof, and there's just no context switching. You also have Git history as well to help with that one. Prevents config drift, as you have that full transparency, so you can understand where you're starting to go or where you're starting to diverge. And sort of if you're implementing new services, you can see where and when that was done and by who. So again, it keeps it all under one house, which is really neat. You've got multiple environments for different purposes. So like I mentioned earlier, dev, test, prods, pre-prod, you name it, it's all there. So you can sort of play in these different environments and not get stuck and stung like I did, and have those harsh learning curves, although they're needed at times, probably not the best way to do it. So yeah, and you can deploy your applications with the developer-friendly commands, which just makes it easier for everybody, in my opinion. Like I said, if you ask me to go and create all of this by hand with the Azure CLI, like a very granular way of doing it, I wouldn't be able to do it. And yes, it can create knowledge gaps, but then you can also identify where those knowledge gaps are to be able to go and work on them, for example. So a knowledge gap that I had was databases and how you tie databases properly and securely to backends, and how you then secure the backend securely to the front end. So again, if it's there, it helps you and pushes you in the right direction to then go off and learn and identify these things which you need to know more about. If you want some more videos, then you can go to aka.ms/open-microsoft. Like I said, this is an open source project. You can contribute in different ways. Here's some snippets or some really short videos that are like sub 10 minutes or about 10 minutes of what the Azure Developer CLI is, how you can get started, some other information. And that's just me chatting with the team directly. So you get to hear straight from the horse's mouth what they're up to. What is coming up next? Well, actually, we've got the AZD community call on the 24th of July at 5 p.m. BST. Please make that noted as BST. So if you're not in the UK or on the BST time zone, please just double check that one. And then secondly, we have also got the CI/CD for AI happening tomorrow, and that's with Chris Noring, my wonderful colleague, who's also in London. And that's happening at 5 p.m. BST on the very same channel, so the Microsoft Reactor channel for you. And if you want the resources, again, here is the QR code, or you can go to aka.ms/scale maintain apps resources. I apologize for that name, but it was the one that was available and made the most sense. Alternatively, just scan this QR code. You're going to get a whole bunch of resources, most namely the repo that I've used today, so that you can have fun with that one. You can fork it, you can play with it however you wish, modify it. Is a really good basis to go off. Again, please read the documentation, because of course it does cost money to deploy these resources. It's not absolutely free. And if you are using a free account, then you may run into certain resources not being able to be duplicated in certain locations, especially when it comes to templating. So just be careful of that one. It doesn't cost me much to run this. It's a really good way to trial and error with these sort of technologies, which I think is amazing. It's affordable. It's just not free. So with that one, I want to say a massive thank you very much for listening, for joining today. If you want to connect with me, you can head to my LinkedIn. My name is Liam Conroy Hampton, or Liam C. Hampton if you want X or GitHub. So again, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I will be happily answering them in the chat. Just bring that one down now so you can see it.
Right, Liam, we have one question in the chat, which is from Gonzalo. Are you going to share the repo of this example?
Absolutely. Yes, if we go to the resources page over here, I believe I have it up. So if you click on here, then we have got the this one here, the AZD Azure OpenAI chat repo. So if you click on that one, you can go directly there. Alternatively, if you head over to the awesome AZD website and you search for simple, wait, is it? I think it's simple. If you search for the title, maybe that's it. Maybe that's not it. Yeah, simple chat application using Azure OpenAI. Again, both links are on the resources page. So yeah, just head over to here. Everything which I shared today is also in this post. Amazing stuff.
Great. Thanks very much, Liam. We don't have any other questions. So.
Oh, wonderful. Lovely stuff. Well, thank you ever so much for joining. And I look forward to running another session soon.